I think the more we understand how everybody's different and all the beautiful things everybody brings to the world, and that maybe some of those things that make us uncomfortable, like people, immigrants with different cultures, can be uncomfortable because it's different. But that's part of, like I said, the companies that are changing the world that are American companies.
Definitely.
The large percentage of the people driving those are immigrants.
Are you ready to transform your life? This is a no nonsense show helping immigrants like you create generational wealth, even while working full time. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Saket Jain.
Welcome back, my great wealth listeners. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Mike McManus. I am trouble pronouncing that name because I had to make sure I can pause. And if you know anything about Indian culture, we don't pause when we talk. We just talk. So, Mike, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, what I really liked about Mike's story and why I wanted to bring Mike on the show is that he's a trained urologist who is part of a practice right now. And what we talk about on the show a lot is the burnout. And Mike had a real burnout moment where whether he wanted to continue, and he's going to talk about his story, but I want to give you a prelims of what to focus on as we record, as we talk about this episode, is really around a person's journey who was very successful, who has spent a lot of time getting a degree, getting a qualification, being trained as a urologist, and then transitioning out of it. Where I want you to start focusing on is what was his reasoning to quit something that he has spent decades in not only learning, but helping people. And that's one thing I want you to focus. And the second is what was going through his mind while he was transitioning. And he's still in the transition process, which is perfect when we got Mike's information. I'm like, this is a perfect time to bring him on because he's in that transition process right now. And what is going through his mind today from the decision he made till we are today. So that's really what I want you to focus heavily on. A lot of the information is also relevant, but if you get one thing out of it is start to draw parallels in your journey. If you're feeling you're getting burnt out or you don't have enough time or energy or mental capacity to do things in your life, someone like Mike has been in your situation. So hopefully you get some inspiration from Mike, and let's dive in. Mike, again, thank you for coming on the show, buddy.
Oh, thanks for being here. It's a great show, and I'm so glad you have it out there to help people.
Thanks, man. Mike, we always launch with one question. My favorite question is, what does migrate to wealth mean to you?
Wow. I think in the term migrate is you're moving from one place to another, and whether that's physically or mentally, it requires some courage to make a change. And the wealth part is, to me, especially at this point, is really living your best life. The wealth is freedom to be who you want to be and spend your time with the people you want to spend it with, more so than just numbers in a bank account.
Yeah, definitely, Mike. And as you look into your journey, Mike, how has your definition of wealth evolved? Let's go back to when you were in your 20s, early 20s, late teens, to now wherever you are in your life cycle. Has the definition changed?
Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, I grew up in really a working class family. Both my parents had advanced degrees, had master's degrees, but my dad worked for the county. My mom had been a teacher and then decided to stay at home. So family is 6 kids. So at the time, I think looking back, we would have, we were working class, definitely, maybe barely middle class.
Yeah.
But because of where we lived in a rural farm town, there wasn't a lot of wealth. So it didn't stand out that way as that we had anything lacking, really.
Right.
But there wasn't a lot of extra money. There wasn't any fancy stuff, but it was a very, I would say, traditional American viewpoint that you go to school, you get good grades, and then you go to more school and you get good grades and you get a good job.
Yeah.
And, and that was kind of the path. Although my college years I didn't start medical school till I was 28 because I was doing other things, but I ended up back on that path. And it was really of having a job that provided security of income and security of the job to be able to support a family was really what started me down that road. But then you get there, and like I said, I never was somebody who wanted a lot of fancy things. But it's interesting, once you get going, you like things that are a little nicer than you had before. And you change over time of, what your perspective is about what is wealth. There's a great book called The Gap and the Gain.
Love that.
And talks about, setting goals looking forward, but really looking back to see what you've done, and about looking inside rather than comparing to other people. So I think that, to a good long-winded answer, I can talk as good as anybody there. We'll go on. That really, from a family that, although we weren't lacking, we didn't have a lot. I think wealth was more about having a little bit more about having stuff.
Yeah.
Where now it's more about, I would say, freedom to be what I want to be. The 5 freedoms: freedom of time, and location, and relationships, to me, is what makes life wealthy.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. So, Mike, how are you doing on that journey?
We're getting there. It's funny, as I've been leaving practice, and I'm half time now, and I have more time. And initially it felt like a lot of time to work on my other ventures. But as your mind changes of what you're used to, that time gets taken up.
Yeah.
And after years of being in a practice that was really we were above the 95th percentile for productivity of just working hard all the time, you keep doing the same things. And I find myself still, like, now that there's not a set time, like it used to be, clinic started at 8 a.m. and it finished at 4, and maybe the operating room went a little later, but there was a time block, and I got really tired of being on call because it took up my other time. But outside of that time block was my time. You move into an entrepreneurial role, all of a sudden there's not that same time block, and it's really easy to run amok on yourself and be like, man, I haven't relaxed in a month. Now, there's nobody else to blame.
It's true. 100%.
100%. So I haven't been doing that great of a job, especially the past couple months, on putting that together. I've been letting my new ventures and ambitions take too much time and take away from some of those other freedoms and relationships.
But Mike, before we go forward, let's actually go back on that same journey, right? So you're a trained urologist, a very successful one. You had a great practice, which is in the 95th percentile in terms of the revenue per doctor, which is great. All these are great metrics. What was going on that you started to think you to get out of practice? If you're able to share that.
The current practice I'm in, I came to about 10 years ago, and I joined a mentor from residency. And in the beginning, it was an amazing thing because I had these great people to learn from. And I was learning so much that was really fulfilling. That was really driving. But then you reach a point where you kind of come off that logarithmic portion of the curve, and that part flattens out. And so with that, my satisfaction, that new learning really drives me. And I've found that that's part of what, makes me feel good every day or feel whole. So as that new learning started to die off, there wasn't as much, I wasn't getting as much satisfaction out in practicing medicine. So that part slid off. And then interestingly, about the same time, because before that I was at work, and then when I was at home, it was family time and a lot of time with my 2 daughters. So about the same time that I was becoming less inspired at work, my kids were entering middle school and becoming more independent, and that relationship changed over a couple of years where they don't need you the same way.
Correct.
And so there were a couple big gaps that opened up at the same time. And that's really, I think, in looking back, where the burnout really kind of drove in, is I was still working really hard, but my rewards in life, my personal, emotional, deep rewards, were going away.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that story, Mike. I think a lot of people can relate to that because what Tony Robbins always talks about is, he's one of my mentors. If you're not growing, you're dying. And growth could happen. Doesn't necessarily mean growth is always monetarily. It could be, But that doesn't mean all the time. A lot of people are craving for personal growth. And I think for you, if I can draw something out of your story, was really there's a lot of personal growth at the early stages of those 10 years because you're learning a lot. You're joining events, excited. You're learning the tricks of the trade, how to think on things more efficiently. Your mind was churning. Your mind was learning. Mind actually probably drew a fog on everything else because you justified everything because you were growing. And then came a stage where everything became mechanical because you kind of had figured out that there's only so much you could learn at that time from that practice. So you're like, what else can I do? And of course, given the transition you're talking about your children moving from primary to now middle school, you're like, elementary to middle school, I can never figure this out at your primary. Now transitioning into middle school, well, like, you know what? I have a little bit more time and I am not that satisfied at work. What else can I do? Right? That question is such an amazing question. I'm going to ask you a very radical question. And see if you have a perspective for me to that. What if you kept that question alive when you joined that practice? Would the outcome be any different?
I don't think so. And part of that, I think, is me and how much the desire to learn new things is there. And I've kind of had to accept that there's it, on the downside, where I love to learn new things, is sometimes the drawback of that is then following through with certain things.
Yeah.
And now building my own business, there's this realization that now you got to build a team to support you. If you're not that person who both has the vision and likes to do the grind through and build things, that you need now build a team underneath you. And because somebody's got to do it or else you just spin out and don't get anywhere.
Right.
So I think for me, I had a neighbor for a while, and it's just one of those contrasts. And we lived out in the country, and he lived a few miles down the road, and he would always joke that, he graduated 6th from last in his high school class. And he was a very talented heavy equipment operator. He ran one of the biggest excavators in the world and did a lot of work for fiber optic lines, so it had to be very precise. While he was at work, he was responsible for the lives of all these people around him while he's got this big machine. And at the end of the day, he went home and, like a lot of people in Wisconsin, hung out in the driveway and drank beer.
Yeah.
And he was very satisfied, very happy, felt very fortunate for the life he had.
Right.
And I had this drive to do more, which at times left to being very unsatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, man, I'm jealous.
Right.
I'm a little bit jealous.
Seems really content and satisfied.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And we're all a little different like that. And it took, it was a process of going, okay, instead of being jealous, that's not me. So I need to really embrace who I am and find a way to put that together into my best life. Because if I were him, I would have got bored doing what he's doing.
Correct.
And,
Correct.
And so we all got our own journey, and it's figuring out.
We all do. I think we all have our own. It's kind of interesting. I always talk about it. I've changed, and I say it jokingly, but I'm sad at my heart. I've changed 25 addresses in 23 years I've lived in the U.S. It doesn't show a lot about my stability, right? But I was talking to my wife about it. I think we both came to the conclusion that if we really if we would have been stabilized in the traditional form, we would have killed ourselves, because that's not who we are. Because we like change, and we like because change equates, you're always out of your comfort zone, all right? You're always not surrounded by people you're comfortable with. You have to change yourself to adapt to somebody else's environment. Like when we moved to Wisconsin for about a year and a half, it was a completely different world for us, because Wisconsin is not like DC, because people have deep relationships that goes lifetimes away, right? Kind of like your parents' parents, everyone lived there. People are less open. And we had to break into that network to build a social system. I'm like, you have to completely change who you are. In DC, you can make friends on the street. Not that Wisconsin people are not friendly; they're very friendly, but they don't have a need for new friend.
That is so absolutely true. That was part of our adjustment moving to Wisconsin, because I grew up in it was a small farm town, but we were in Western Colorado. So really we were surrounded by the tourist industry.
Right.
And so there was a lot of change of people, like DC, and people would make strong friendships in a matter of months.
Correct.
Where moving here, and it says a lot about the people here of that bond that, like people are hanging out with people they've known since their whole life, as long as I know. They played together as babies because their parents played together as babies.
Right.
And their parents played together as babies.
100%, man. I always joke that I grew up in this neighborhood. I married the girl next door. She's my high school sweetheart. Our kids played together, and they're gonna marry the girl next door. I'm like, this is Wisconsin for me. There's no need for you to come into my life unless you can really add a massive amount of value to me, not monetarily, but socially and emotionally and spiritually. I don't need you.
Yeah, and
there's something to it. Again, I think to your point about the other guy that you were talking about, the heavy machinery guy, it's like, I'm happy. Why do I change myself? I'm happy. I don't need anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, back to, I think it was Tony Robbins, I heard it from Brendan Burchard about you can only have like 4 or 5 close friends.
Right.
We only have so much bandwidth, and then, it starts moving out. And so when you already have those, and you've had those 5 close friends for as long as you can remember, because you had your diapers changed together.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting culture because people are very friendly.
Right.
But it's hard to be beyond a peripheral relationship.
Definitely, Adam. So we have to change our thinking. We have to change ourselves. We have to be okay that we're not going to become friends in 2 meetings, or at least we will remain acquaintances for months. And we have to figure it out. And that actually not only made us appreciate the openness and the transitory nature of DC, but also gave us a glimpse into what does stability do, right? Because in our life always is that we don't want to be, because it seems, and this is my theory, I could be completely off. I think we're going off script, which is perfectly fine. I love it. This conversation is real. I think it's kind of more about when you are not comfortable, you have to remain open, period. You cannot be saying, Mike's my best friend because I grew up with him. Well, Saket could be another friend, and he could bring a very different value to you, but the depth of the relationship could be very different. But introducing a new person in your life brings a lot of sometimes conflicting opinions, conflicting perspectives, and in those conflicts is when you grow, right? That's really where a lot of, I look at it, and I'm an immigrant myself, so I can definitely speak about it. When an immigrant leaves their country and they move to physical immigration, we're talking about, because there are different types of migration. We're talking about physical immigration. You can't hold on to anything that you knew mentally. You can't say mom's going to cook food for me because mom may not have moved with you, right? Or your foods may not be available in that country. So now you have to completely change and adapt, which is why probably the drive to succeed is always going to be there, because they're never comfortable, because they're not alone.
And it's such a different, I moved a lot, but my full spectrum of where I've lived has been from Alaska to Virginia.
Oh, wow.
I didn't come from another culture, though. Like, I try and think about that.
Like culture. West to east is completely. Alaska, I have no idea. I've never been to Alaska. But I can only imagine where the sun only comes up for 3 hours. Sun always comes up or never comes up, only 2 extremes.
I was there in the summertime.
8 hours of sun.
But the difference in people who move from India, that's, I don't think that was outside of my realm of comfort, I think.
Right.
Go, I'm going to move to another country. I have a friend from, my early adulthood who ended up moving permanently to Chile. There's so much more when you go into a culture that's completely different. And I think that's why you look so much at so many things that are where America drives change, but the people driving the change aren't natives.
No, it's very unfortunate, because the land of opportunity, unfortunately, we become comfortable. And it's probably going to happen to me, my family. It's just going to happen. And I've accepted that. I'm like, I'm not going to fight that because the hunger and the drive changes. But I think to your earlier point where you were talking about the heavy machinery guy, right? That your neighbor, I think it's probably what's happened to him, right?
Yeah.
Like he probably being the best at his trade, he's reached his peak. He's like, that's all I want to do. I always want to do. That's all I ever knew. Well, why would I do anything more now? I'm done. I've achieved the peak.
And you've kind of got all you want. You don't have that drive. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people in other countries who go, yeah, America would be cool, but I'm fine here,
Oh, definitely. Not all my family is here and they don't want to come here. Not because the place sucks. They're like, we live like kings in India. Why would we come, Saket, to wash dishes every night? I'm like, you make a very good point. You shouldn't. But you'll gain something very different. Yeah, dishwashing is going to be hard and making your own food and cleaning your own house. But the expansion and experience and the growth, even if you move for a year or two, it's going to be tremendous. Tremendous.
It is, but it's a special person who does that.
I completely
it's really
completely agree.
And that's why those people, I think, come and they change things. They do amazing things. And probably that's because if you're smart enough, especially if you didn't have resources in wherever you came from in India, and you can figure out how to, with minimal resources, get to the other side of the world and start a life.
Man. Definitely.
You've got some significant skills.
Completely.
And then if you're like, okay, I don't want to wash dishes, and you start figuring out more, and once you start realizing like what I can do, and then you start layering on another layer and another layer, that those are people who change the world.
No, 100%, Mike. You touched something very deeply that I want to riff on a little more. I think it's kind of like, and this is not just about me, it's probably true for a lot of people, not just immigrants, is that the question you ask is very important, right? You could say that in America, you can't afford somebody to wash the dishes, or because in India, the labor is cheap. So at least it was when I left, on right now. But it's everyone has somebody helping in the house, cooking food, cleaning your dishes. There's just, every household has it. So there's only two ways to look at it. You can complain about it saying that US doesn't have it. It has it. You can't afford it, right? It's a very different mentality. So now the question is, you can say, I can't afford it, or you can ask a very different question. How can I afford it? If that's so important to you, the question is not about, I'm going to complain about it. The question is, what can I do about it? I know a way that I may be able to hire somebody to wash my dishes because I hate it so much. It takes away so much of my valuable time. I'm making it all up, and dishwashing is just an example. I love washing dishes. To my lovely wife, I'll always wash it. No, I don't. But it's washing dishes. It's a more of a metaphor, right? Whatever you hate doing in life, there's only two options you have. We can complain about it and say that life sucks, people around me suck, or you can ask a very different question: how can I make it better?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love about your journey, Mike, because that's the question you're asking now, right? You have the freer time, and compared to before, of course, your mind's going to say, I thought I had 2 hours extra, and that 2 hours extra, you would have thought that it would change my life. And now that 2 hour gets passed away like that, because your mind fills it up with activities that you either feel necessary or it creates an urgency or importance, and that 2 hours are gone, that you can say, I'll read a book, I'll write a paper, I'll do this, I'll do a workout, I'll go jump from my rocket, whatever that 2 hours seemed so big when you didn't have them. But now you have them, it looks so small.
Yeah. And when we all know, I mean, and I remember back, in college and in medical school, the less time you have, the more productive you get with the time you have. And I remember when I first carved out 2 hours a day, when you say 2 hours to work on my side projects, I'm building my life. And it was a huge deal. And then as of last October, I go half time. And now I've carved out an additional 2.5 days a week.
Right.
And at first it was this huge thing. And I was making all this progress and making great utilization of it. And then slowly it becomes normal. And then I take on additional projects, and now it's too much. And then it's kind of coming back. And it's a really interesting process, I think, when somebody comes out of, and I guess I knew this going in. As a doctor, it's been a very specific pathway. And the pathway to get there is you go to school, you get good grades, you go to the next school, you get good grades, you go to residency, you get a job. And then even the job, somebody's schedule, you don't have to find a patient. You don't schedule them yourself. You show up and you got a full clinic schedule. You got a full OR schedule, and you do the work. And it can be, and there's creativity within the work of solving problems. But what am I going to do today? I don't need to plan that. It's fed to me. Sometimes it's fed through a fire hose.
Yeah.
And now
there are pros and cons of that, but yes, you're right.
And now you step away into something different, where now you have to, time management is a totally different beast.
Yeah.
When you have the opportunity to, get sidetracked doing nothing, and, and whether it's, I need to follow up on this connection that I made through Facebook. Now I'm scrolling Facebook, which I've done more scrolling Facebook in the last 2 months than I did the last 20 years. And I've never been a Facebook scroller. What am I doing?
What am I doing? Like, one more post. Promise to myself, just one more. Just one more. Just one more.
Yeah. Or looking out the window, or whatever it used to be you never did.
Yeah.
And some of that is positive stuff. Some of it is downtime. It's rest that you must we need. But some of it's horribly wasted.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I love this conversation because my wife is going through a period right now where she's going back to school. She's going back to study Indian medicine, which is called Ayurveda, arguably the oldest medicine in the world. I'm not going to argue with anybody on that. But she's studying that, and she's full-time into school right now. She's actually moved away from home just so she can focus. She's in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'm like, so I love that. We've been married for 23 years. You choose the time to go back to the school when I was looking forward to my freedom because I quit W-2 2 years ago. I'm like, I love how you filled up my time without asking me, because now I'm a married but single dad. I love that. I love that part of my life. I would not trade that for anything. But I'm like, this is interesting when the time frees up, the opportunity just opens up because your mind's not constrained anymore. I know you and I both had Coach T, Trevor McGregor, as our coach. He's the one who I had a conversation with before quitting. He's like, "Zach, just quit." I'm like, "Why?" He said, "Because you won't have any constraints on your thinking. Right now, as a W-2 employee, you have constraints on your thinking, and it's good or bad, that's arguable, but you have constraints. Because somebody else is giving you can think between these two lines, but if you step outside your own line, you may lose your job. So stay within those two realms and you'll be fine." But now there are no boundaries, which is good and bad. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny how your wife probably felt constrained before because you had a
definitely, man. I was not available, so she had to hold the fort down.
Completely
understandable.
And now there was room, and she chased a dream.
She's like, "I'm going to do it before you pick something else that you're going to drag us down with. I'm going to say, I'm doing this. You win. You sacrificed all your life because of me. I've moved you multiple different states, not the countries. Actually, one time a country as well. Now it's your turn. So we'll do that. So Mike, as you move forward, what is your plan now? How are you going to make the most out of the time that you have created, time freedom that you've created for yourself?
So I work 2 days a week until the end of May, and then I'm done completely.
Okay.
This summer, we are moving to Salt Lake City.
Awesome.
My wife and I are both originally from Colorado, so that's much closer to home, and opened up a lot of opportunity, more of the things that fill our soul, mountains, the being outside, desert. So that's our big move coming up. And my time is now focused into several different ventures. My initial world I built to be able to leave medicine was commercial real estate. And now we're focusing, went through that process like a lot of people, started out with small, we bought a fourplex, and various course of events, how it was actually things that didn't work out the way I planned, but that meeting the right people have now transitioned into non-multifamily. And that was really through connecting with a gentleman, Ash Patel, and his group Invest Beyond Multifamily. We're doing retail, industrial, warehouse, land entitlement. It's a wonderful space where there's a lot of room for creativity. There's less rules where, when you're dealing with where people live, there's a lot more legal restrictions as to how you can do things. When it's a business to business contract,
definitely
you can set it up however you like. So it's fun in that way, that some of the best deals we've seen come through our group actually started out as throwaways, and somebody else picked it up and dug into it and found the silver lining. And some of them turn into, what was worthless turns into a double your money in a year kind of deal.
Right.
And so that's really fun with that part. Through that, and this is where, like you said, you take the guardrails off, and what happens is opportunity comes. So because of my involvement there, I got involved with a company called Rise Medical that is a relationship wellness med spa that has within their program relationship counseling, which is probably the thing that's missing from most of those.
Right.
Plus, sexual wellness program for men and women to kind of work on the whole package. And that this year will become a franchisable business. And with the focus they've got it built out, it can be really easy to drop right into an existing medical practice. So I'm involved with that, and then spinning out of that and the commercial real estate. I've made some great connections with some people who've automated their real estate business using a lot of AI tools. And so between that and the Rise Medical Group, we're working on converting some of those tools to build out some efficiency platforms for medical practices. And hopefully we'll have that rolling out between now and next summer. So
amazing. Did you ever think that would be your job for quitting?
No. I mean, some of this, 2 years ago, if somebody had hit me up with the med spa idea, it's so in Western medicine, and it's really just because of the way, what we do is sick care. There's so many negatives you hear throughout your career about somebody being entrepreneurial and building a business. And so those things are always very negative. And, then when you take those blinders off and kind of go, well, is this helping people? And you're providing a service that people want to pay for and they're psyched about. Well, that's a good thing. And would have I ever thought I would be in a tech deal? Absolutely not. Especially, you're in your mid 50s and not in the tech business. But all the things you've done in life kind of come together. And I started seeing all these gaps and things that could be easily fixed with tools that were already available.
Yeah.
And then you start talking to people, and I'm talking to the tech people, real estate side, and they're like, at first they're like, no, we don't do medicine. And then they're like, these are just practice management. I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh yeah, we already have that. And then it was kind of like, how do we now, well, I've never built this in a medical business. How do we do this? So as we're digging around and I'm beating my head against the wall, I realized I already know the people who know how to build it and have the resources to beta test it. So it kind of all I know at times I really, this morning, I'm like, do I need to cut some of this out? Am I doing too much? And it probably is, but now it's building the team underneath. So I hired a VA in November, which is my first step in moving through this. And we're probably going to expand that to a bigger team. The hard part is a lot of this stuff isn't generating a whole lot of revenue yet. So it's spending.
Just yet.
Man, if I keep thinking, you always realize what you realize with hindsight. If I could go back to when I started this journey of leaving 2 years ago and understand all the things that I should spend money on that I wasn't going to, all the things I was going to spend money on that I shouldn't have.
Spent,
I mean, I could have built out a significant VA team out of my earnings and built this whole system.
Correct.
Before I even stepped back.
Completely, 100%, Mike. I think unfortunately, even if you knew at that time, you wouldn't have done it because you had to be ready to get to that point. And looking back, I think what they say, hindsight 2020, looking back, you should have, you could have, and you would have, but you were a different person back then, right? And that's probably the most, I think, a very insightful thought about for anyone who always says that, I wish I was able to go back in time and do this. Well, you probably, even if you knew what you knew, you wouldn't have done it because you were not this person, period.
That's so true. I mean, I look back, I had some opportunities handed to me on a silver platter in my 20s to go down the road that I'm going down now. And could have done it with less risk, not giving up a high-paying job, and just wandered into it. My whole life probably would have been a lot stressful and a lot more fun.
Correct.
But I wasn't ready for it then.
You were not ready. You probably wouldn't have appreciated. Now looking back, you can. Because I think at some point, even if you, I always think about that, right? What if I took that path? Well, I could have taken that path, but I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be married to the woman I love. I wouldn't be having two beautiful kids that I love. Life would have been very different. I don't know better or worse. I have no idea. And I don't want to gamble it. I'm like, this is perfect. Now let's make the most of it, which actually transitions us to the next question, Mike, which is towards the end of our show, we always ask for lasting questions, which is looking back, right, as your 20-year-old self, what's one insight you would give that person that could change the entire trajectory of their life? Just one. I wouldn't ask you to do anything different because I think your life has turned out the perfect way it would have, it could have, it should have. But there's a 20-year-old Mike listening to this show somewhere. How can we impact their life?
I think I can say this one with confidence because my 17 and 19-year-old daughters hear this all the time. Don't get stuck living somebody else's life. And
Definitely.
It's hard at that age because you're still learning who you are and you're learning what the world is. And you have to somewhere try on, like listen to other people and be like, okay, this is the way the world works and try it out. But I think for a lot of kids who do well in school, and I call it the smart kid trap, don't get stuck thinking you have to take the hardest classes and the hardest major that are in school.
Right.
That those aren't going to always lead you to what your dream is. And maybe that's the thing that I learned on this journey is the look ahead 10 years. Right. It's hard to do, especially when you're 20. You look back 10 years, you were 10, you were totally a different person.
Yeah.
But where do you want to be in 10 years? What's your ideal life? And are the decisions you're making leading to that ideal life or leading somewhere else?
Correct.
And it's okay if your ideal life changes, because if that changes, now you got a different vision. Okay, am I on track to my new vision? And that's what I didn't do. Like, I don't know. And then I'll change. And so why make a plan?
Right.
It's going to change. That was the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Make a plan. Get a vision for an ideal life. Make a plan to get there. If it changes, great. But then you have something to guide those decisions. Am I doing things that lead to my ideal life? Or are they leading off some other place that's a random event?
Yeah.
Then if you choose a random event path, great. At least you did it knowing what you were choosing.
100%, Mike. Love that answer, because I think I led my life thinking I'm going to take a day at a time, and I don't care about planning. I know the confidence I'll figure it out. While I had a great life, I can't complain about it. But had I had a plan to move towards, but the key is, to your point, not be married to that plan. Right? Give your 100% to that plan. Commit yourself, do everything. Just because a hurdle comes doesn't mean you give up on the plan. But don't put a guarantee of that plan happening, because what happens with a guarantee is that you put blinders on too close and too early. Let the plan manifest itself, and at some point, if you decide that, you know what, this is not worth pursuing anymore, for a variety of reasons, because you change as a person, you have spouse or a partner in your life, kids in your life, your aspirations, your vision changes. You have to look at that plan. Is that plan you working out the way you would have imagined? You have an imagination for life now, right? So don't be married to it. I love that plan. Love the idea of, but a plan-less life is probably going to lead you to a life which is really haphazard. And you look back when you're 40, 50, you'll realize that I wish I had a plan.
Yeah, and that plan's not just, what's my job going to be?
Right.
I mean, I got this from Brendan Burchard. You think about, like, how do you want to live every day? What time do you want to get up?
Yeah.
What part of the world do you want to live in? Who are the people you want to be around? How do you want to work? Do you want to be in a creative space? Do you want to, be sitting at a computer? Do you want to be out wandering through the sagebrush? And then you build that vision. And then what job fits into that vision?
Correct.
And it might be something you didn't consider otherwise. Yeah. But if that job fits your whole life vision, you're probably going to like it.
Correct. 100%. Mike, great. Thank you for that answer, Len. Very insightful. We're going to take a little bit of an abstract view on the next question around, where do you feel humanity as a whole lacks? And where should we migrate to as humans in the next few decades?
Wow. That's I was watching a movie with my wife last night it was about the Catholic Protestant struggles in England when they were banning the Catholic Church, and you just keep going, wow, like, so much of human history is, power struggles and how different things that were meant to be beautiful were misused. And I think actually the world is becoming a better place, as much as it's hard to see. And we have to continue to strive down that road. And we're going to see a lot of changes. I really do believe that we're going to see the revolution is going to change the way we work, and there will be good and bad of it. But, if we take that and look at it, that if it gets rid of a lot of tasks we don't want to do anyway, or keeps us living our best life and being productive. But, I think the more we understand how everybody's different and all the beautiful things everybody brings to the world, and that maybe some of those things that make us uncomfortable, like immigrants with different cultures, can be uncomfortable because it's different. But that's part of, like I said, the companies that are changing the world, that are American companies, a large percentage of the people driving those are immigrants. And it's that new ideas mixing together to come up with beautiful things and help us understand all of us better.
Love that, Mike. I think we're all trying to strive for that. You're doing that with your scene, because if you're not open to new ideas, you won't be making this change. So part of that is that I think in that journey, we'll end up doing service to the whole human. Everyone tries to be the better version of them by inviting a change. whatever they think. It doesn't have to be 25 films. It could be as simple as being open to a great idea that somebody didn't respect offered, because that idea could literally transform the way life, or could be a new shape your reality into very different. So thank you, Mike, for saying.
You're welcome. And sorry, I'm probably overrunning my time, but
No, that's fine.
the idea of migrating to wealth, and I just read this in a book. I want to give proper credit, so I'm gonna reference it as Seth Godin, and all of Seth Godin's books are amazing. But the idea of, and this is a book about marketing, but not just marketing, but business.
Marketing like a pro? Is that the one?
What's that?
This is marketing, or which one is that?
Marketing. Yeah.
I love that book. Love that book.
And that if you start out, if how you earn your living in life is you go out and you look at other people and you find their pain points and you find their problems and their frustrations.
Yeah.
And you find solutions to those, you're going to be financially successful and you're going to make the world a better place.
Right. 100%. Mike, thank you again, buddy. Appreciate it. One last parting question, actually two maybe. One last one, which is very important. Both are important. Is there anything you wish I asked you on this episode that you feel worth mentioning?
I think I threw in my last one right there.
That's perfect.
Great.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you again for talking. Mike, if somebody wants to learn about the work you do, get in touch with you, maybe have a conversation, where can they find you?
Our website is thefortresscapital.com. We just rebuilt it, should go live today. Had that meeting this morning. Surgeon Syndicate podcast is on all the major platforms. It's really focuses on educating doctors, medical professionals about the non-multifamily commercial space and other financial planning things. And on LinkedIn is probably where I check my messages, and there's, on a regular basis, and try and make a point of reaching out to people. But if you go to The Fortress Capital, there'll be a link there if you want to have a conversation to just schedule a call.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you again for taking the time. And listeners, thank you again for your lending us your most precious asset, which is your time. We thank you for tuning in, for you to tune in. And until next time, take it easy and go build a great life. Thank you.
If you got value from this episode, you might consider sharing this content with a friend. But most importantly, be sure to take action on what you've learned. One way you can take the next step is to connect directly with Socket on an investor call. That link is waiting for you in the show notes below.